All right, so it's 4 o'clock. We'll give everybody one more minute to jump in, then we'll get started. I want to thank everybody for taking time out from your day to join us in this webinar. My name is Daniel Sahowski, and again, today's webinar will be covering our IP audio, some unique inside applications, and just a few extra ways that you can provide more value into your sales. So we'll give it one more minute, and then we'll get started. If anybody has any questions prior or during the webinar, feel free just to drop them into the chat box there at the bottom, and I'll come to them as I go, or I'll get to them at the end. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started today. Everybody should be seeing my screen there. You should see the Speco Technologies landing page for the IP audio. Let me just back up one click here. So today's webinar is going to cover Speco's Technologies IP audio solutions. What we're going to do today is cover a few different things. We're going to talk a little bit about typical IP audio, how it's set up, what is done during the install process of it. What applications do we need on the Speco side of it once we've done that install? And then also we'll cover which products that we might want to use during those installs. So to start us off, we're going to start at the Speco Technologies webpage like we always do. If we want to know more on the website portion of it, we would go to Solutions, and then you'll see here that we can select IP audio. So what this is going to do is give you a quick product overview. Some of the first flagship products or some of the top selling products will be up front here. It's going to give you a little bit about some of the things we're going to cover today. What can Speco IP audio do for you? What are some ideal applications for Speco IP speakers? And control these Specos with Speco Audio Manager. So today what we're going to do is, the reason I wanted to pull this up is because one of the applications you're going to need when you're, well, depending on your install, but if you're wanting to use Speco IP speakers as a audio solution that's not tied to cameras, and you will need to download the Speco Audio Manager. You can do so by selecting that box there, and then it will start in your downloads over here to the right. I've already got it installed, but for those that don't have it installed, that would be the first step. Now, a few other things. Another way to kind of get a little bit more granular with what products do we want to work with. Obviously, we can select the three that are on the landing page, but I've kind of already done this for you, is I've went to Products, Product Finder, and then I've just went through and got the IP speakers. And what this is going to do for me is give me pretty much all of the options as far as what IP speakers that we currently are offering. So we'll start off at the first. It's going to be the SPIP C6A. The next one's going to be the same number, except you'll notice there that it has a M on the end of it. So for those that aren't familiar with our products, the one that does not have the M on it is going to be the version without the microphone built into it. You'll notice there that there is a 8A and an 8AM. It's going to hold true for that one too. So the M is going to give you the built-in microphone. Now we also have the SPIP H9AM. You'll notice that it is a typical bullhorn, just like your SIP HAA and your 8AM. The difference between the 9AM is that it is a 30-watt speaker. So if you're wanting to get really loud and stretch out that volume, the 9AM is your 30-watt, and your SIP HAM is going to be your typical 15-watt. Now keep in mind that if you're needing a 30-watt, it could require PoE plus depending on your range. So that's the only thing you want to note about this particular speaker. Now, if we go into a speaker, depending on which one we're looking for, obviously we know we have our cut-in speakers, we know we have our outdoor bullhorn speakers, so we can keep it pretty simple. But once we dive into a product, You'll see here that it's going to take us to the picture of it. We can see how the mounting application is going to be. Both sides are going to show you both sides of the speaker. Also important here, and you'll see as we dive into this webinar a little bit deeper, it's going to show you with each speaker what's on the dongle. We're looking at 12-volt power here. Mic in, we're looking at a alarm input, and then we're looking at our RJ45. So multiple looks of the camera, but we can also dive in here and look at the specification sheet here. And as you can see, you can get more granular with what can this speaker do. And it's going to show you the power rating here, the operating temperature, the weight. But you'll also notice here that it's going to show you that same dongle. And then we can come in and you can utilize whichever input you would like to. One thing we are updating, there is only one alarm input. So if you're seeing that, that will be corrected very shortly. And also all of our devices are SIP compliant. They are NDA compliant, and they do offer the same Speco 5-year warranty with them as well. So let me pull up this little thing here. So for those that aren't familiar with IP speakers, real quick, we're just going to go over what is an IP speaker, how do we power it up, and what are some things that we need to make sure we know. So all of our IP speakers are either 12-volt or they're PoE, which means that we can power that over the Ethernet just like we can a camera. We are limited to the 325 feet, just like a camera as well too. We do have onboard audio storage, which part of this webinar today will teach you how to use that audio onboard storage and then trigger certain cameras and messages to happen. Built-in microphone. So as we spoke earlier, the M models do have the built-in microphone where the non-M models do not. Integration with IP systems. We can integrate our speakers with SecureGuard VMS by tying them to cameras directly. They can also be applied to Speco Blue VMS, your mobile app, or any type of mobile connection to your devices. Weather resistant or indoor-outdoor designs. We showed you there in the bullhorn and also in the indoor cut-in speaker. Easy setup and management. So as we go through today, we'll show you how to find those speakers. Multicast streaming. This is more of an advanced function. We won't cover much on the day, but we can assign different speakers a multicast streaming address so that way they can speak or they can play music seamlessly downstream. So when you're starting to install for the first time, obviously you should choose an installation location and make sure it's suitable for your IP speaker. It's kind of like cameras, where I want somebody to be able to hear the message. I want them to be relatively close to that speaker. The bullhorns are going to give you more long-range options than the indoor cut-in speakers. So we want to unbox and inspect. So we want to make sure that there's no damage to the speaker. We want to make sure we have all the necessary components that are included with it. Once we know our install location, we want to go ahead and pull our wire to that location. Once we pull our wire to that location, we can go ahead and mount the speaker. So all of your IP speakers are going to come with the attached mounting bracket. The bullhorn is going to have the U bracket, and then the cut-in speakers are going to have the knobs on the side that you can turn past your cut-in spot to lock them in. We want to connect to the network right. So the next step is going to be to get that speaker talking to your audio manager. And to do so, you want to make sure that your speakers are all located on a local network that is just speakers. And then you want your computer that's running the audio manager, which we'll cover here shortly, to be able to see those speakers out in the field on that same local network. So we want to access the speaker's interface, which is what we'll do here shortly. We're going to assign it an IP address. That way, it's just like a camera. We have multiple speakers on that network. If we had multiple cameras on that network, we would assign them all an independent IP address. We're going to configure the audio settings, adjust the volume, equalizer settings, or any of your preferences. And it's always a good practice to make sure the firmware is up to date on both your speakers or any of your cameras that you're working with. We can test the speaker as well, and after setting it up, we'll send an audio stream or play a test tone to ensure the speaker is working correctly, adjust volume, or position any necessary. You do have capabilities of integrating with other systems, which is what we'll show you today. And then you can finalize and document. Make sure that all your speakers are working, take notes for anything that was changed, keep track of IP addresses. And the unique thing is most of this stuff is going to be done for you in the Speco Audio Manager. We can close that out. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of jump through a little practice, and then we're going to, so the Speco Audio Manager is what you're going to see here on my screen. I'm going to double click that and give me 1 second. Apologize. Pull this up. Okay. So the Speco Audio Manager, once we download it for the first time, the first thing that's going to come up here is, as we spoke earlier, is that the speaker is on a independent network. This computer is on that same network, and I have my speaker running through a switch. So you'll see here that automatically, if I hit scan devices, which is what I'd recommend you doing for the first time, it's going to go out there and find that speaker that's out in the field. So for me, I'm going to use this as a first time to come in, and I've already changed this IP address, but whatever the IP address is here, you'll notice 192.168.1.82. I'm going to open that up. So I'm using the IP Audio Manager to access that camera directly. Admin1234 is going to be your default password. And then you'll see here that I am in the speaker directly. So from here, we have options between our basic settings, which is time and date, our network settings, which is going to tell us whether it's receiving a IP address by either DHCP or static, our on-viv settings, our SIP account information, our audio options, which we'll go through here in a second, but I guess we can take a second now. So it's going to give you your codec settings up top, your speaker options. So this is how we can control the volume of the speaker. Am I going to turn the amp auto off? Yes. And some few other settings as far as jitter buffers, HFP, and NR. So down here, you'll notice that because this is an M version, this is actually the SPIP H9AM, which is a 30-watt speaker. We do have the capabilities of enabling the microphone, and you'll see here that we have the ability to select and unselect a mic to be able to enable it and disable it. And then also some more advanced settings below that. If anybody needs to get into that, feel free to ask any questions off this webinar. The next option is going to be our media file. So this will also play into some of the integration stuff we do here shortly. With the media file, it's going to give you the options to come in, and by default, there are different bell schedules in here. And then you also have different user files. User files are files that we can upload from our computer, PC, custom messages that can be used to be played on the speaker. So under alarm, we're going to be able to see our alarm in function. Under alarm in, we have the ability to be able to enable that alarm. And then we are selecting, are we going to play the file of any of the pre-configured bell settings, or are we going to use any of the user files that we had uploaded under media file? So the next question is, how is this going to cycle? Is it going to happen once only, which we don't need any more settings? Is it going to happen multiple times? And if it happens multiple times, how many times? 1 to 1,000, take your pick. Or is it going to be based off of duration? So we're going to play this file for 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute and 30. Pick your poison. So the next option would be your HTTP URL. We can play the file that has been enabled. And then you want to save this function. So you'll notice if we're applying any types of schedules, we can come into schedule and we can select a certain schedule, name it, play the schedule, action type. So we can tell it another file that we have downloaded that's going to play based off another time that says maybe it's 5 o'clock, it's quitting time. or whatever the use case is that you want to at a certain time. The RTP multicast is going to be the IP address that we're assigning it to be able to talk to other devices and also to be able to interact with the IP Speco Audio Manager. Firewall is going to be if you choose to put any firewall rules or automatic defense rules. If this is something you need more information on, we'll refer you to our audio manager or audio product manager, Brandon Marker. And then under system is when we can come in, reboot, reset, upgrade if there's another firmware version available. And then we can also come in and provide a new username password, in which you would do down here at the bottom. So now let's talk about some particular applications. We went over what do the speakers look like? How do we find more information on the actual speaker line? Now let's talk about some real life cases, some unique projects we've worked on here recently. So there's obviously we have the typical IP audio that we can come in and use our audio manager to be able to play messages, whether that's going to be a public address. But we also have some really unique applications to where we can start taking these IP speakers and going along the lines of providing more of a deterrent with our camera systems. So the first one I want to cover here is going to be on talk down through Speco IP speakers that are connected. I'm sorry, the Speco IP speaker that are connected to Speco IP cameras. So for this use case here, I am using the SPIPH 9AM 30-watt speaker. This is what we were working off of earlier. I'm also going to be using our 04B9M, which is a 2.8 12mm motorized lens bullet camera. And this is going to work with pretty much any alarm output, audio out camera that we offer, which is a pretty big majority of them. So let's take a look first at the speaker inputs and outputs. So what we're going to do, guys and girls, is we're going to take this camera when we're using our app, when we're using Speco Blue VMS, if we're using any of our platforms, and when we pull up this camera, and if we want to, even though it doesn't have a speaker built into it, if we want to talk down using this 30-watt horn, then this is what we would need to do. So you're going to take the speaker. Obviously, here's our speaker inputs and outputs, our external connectors. We have the PoE that is going to be wired in, giving it power. We have our alarm in. We're not going to use that this use case. And then we also have our audio in. And then we have our DC power. So keep in mind right here, we also, on the camera side of it, we have a 3.5mm audio in, 3.5mm audio out, DC 12 volt. We have our PoE plug to power it up, and we have our CSV output and our typical alarm inputs, outputs. So what we need to make this happen is a 3.5mm male to RCA male connected from the camera 3.5 audio out, which would be on the camera side. And then we're going to plug it into the speaker RCA in, which is going to be on the audio inside over here. So what we've done is we've now connected the speaker to the camera. The camera is getting power from its own PoE source. The speaker is getting power from its own PoE source. And then now what we'll be able to do is talk through that speaker when we're pulling up the camera. So the next use case we're going to talk about is talk down and or message play via alarm output through the Speco IP speaker connected to the Speco IP camera. So I'm actually going to pull up the speaker here directly so we can kind of see this. So to make this application happen, so what's different from what we were just doing? So now in this application, we're going to take our camera. We want to be able to talk down through that camera. But we also want to be able to, when an analytic event happens, we want a pre-recorded message to be able to play on this loud 30-watt speaker. So you're still going to need the same 3.5mm to RCA connector to be able to go from your 3.5mm audio out to your RCA audio in. But now what we're going to do is we're going to run a twisted pair from our alarm output of that camera into the alarm input of the speaker. So just to repeat that, we're going to run a twisted pair, just 2 wires from the alarm output of the camera into the alarm input of the speaker. Okay. So I'm going to read it, then go into the camera directly and show you. So we're going to enable the audio alarm in. We're going to select the file to play, select the cycle mode, and save. And what that looks like is, since we'd already pulled up that IP speaker over here, we know that we've got our mic turned on. We're going to go to alarm, and you'll see here that we have our alarm input. So we're going to enable that. So we're telling it, okay, when we receive this alarm input, we're going to either play the bell files or we're going to play one of these user files. And just a reminder, if you're not sure where to do that, you're going to select back on media file. You're going to come over here to the right. You're going to select one of these files and you're going to choose that file. And then you're going to go through and find the one that you want to upload. So again, we're turning on the alarm enable. We're defining if we want to use a bell or if we want to use one of the custom files we uploaded. So for most applications, I'm going to say I want to go off 3 times or 2 times, and then I'm going to save that. So I've now told the speaker that's out in the field, when you receive this alarm input trigger, you're going to play the file this many times, twice. So now on the setup side of that, oops. So now what we have to do is we have to program the trigger in the recorder. So everybody's familiar with in our recorders. And I can pull one up here and show you live too if everybody would like. Once we set up the camera system, we're going to go into that particular analytic. So what is causing this to go off? And it might be intrusion or line crossing. We're going to come in down here and select this alarm out. So we're going to select that camera's alarm output, because if you remember how we set this up, the alarm output from the camera is going to trigger the speaker when it's triggered. So we're telling it in the system under AI and event, when we set it up and we're at trigger mode, we're going to tell it to trigger that alarm output of that camera. And that's as easy as it is to be able to tie the IP audio to a camera to either be able to play a pre-recorded message or to be able to use it to talk down using the power of a 15 or 30 watt speaker on board. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat box there. Also want to take a second here and introduce Brandon Marker. Brandon Marker is our IP audio product manager. Brandon, you want to take a second and say hi? I know you had some networking issues earlier. Okay, and I think I've actually got him muted. All right, so what is the size of an audio file? That's a really good question. Let's see if we can pop up in the speaker here and see if it tells us. So it looks to me like you can upload up to 10 user files, and you have a total of 3,836 kilobytes. And I'm going to presume there that you can fill up that until you reach this limit there. And I'll let Brandon chime in if there's anything different from that. So we covered a little bit about, obviously we kind of recap here. We have covered our IP audio solutions. We have covered once we access those, how do we access those cameras directly? The next thing I really want to kind of cover, and it's a very short process here, is the Speco Audio Manager. So with the Audio Manager here, you'll see that my device that first came in here, it was really easy for me to connect to that speaker. If I want to hit a test, which is, I've got it turned up really loud. So let me, before I make myself go deaf, I'm going to go ahead and crank this volume down real quick. So one good thing about the Audio Manager is when we're testing, excuse me, when we were testing devices out in the field and we're trying to zone speakers, if we want to find out where they're at or if they're connected and working, we can hit this play button here. Not sure if everybody heard that, but it presents a chime over the speaker. We now see what my speaker name is. We see the MAC address, the IP address, network, gateway, everything you need. If we're once we program a SIP account, you'll see that. What RTP multicast IP have I assigned to it? What version firmware is it running to? And what is the system admin there? So scan device is going to show you any of your devices in the field. If we come here to options, not very many things here. We choose to run this at startup. If it's a program that you want to automatically turn on and start playing that audio, if this computer is one that shuts down, your network information as far as what is that IP address and what's the SIP port that it's looking for the speakers to come in by default. About is going to cover build date, version, and if you have any type of issues or have more questions, reach out to tech support at specotech.com. And currently we can change it from English, Russian, and Chinese. So the next option we have here is the RTP multicast.
Hey, Daniel, are you able to hear me?
I am. Welcome to the party, Brandon.
Thank you. Sorry, having struggles with my internet here. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share my screen, but I could point out a few things there here along with you, if that's all right.
Yeah, definitely. And Brandon is the guy that Brandon's very familiar with SIP, more information on SIP, any of your Kodak, your multicast IP. Once you really start getting into making the audio system work, Brandon's a great resource for if you know you have a larger project coming on, then you definitely want to reach out to Brandon or our SEAL team or both of them, because if it goes to SEAL team, Brandon's usually going to get involved anyway. But it really allows us to be able to get on the forefront with you of laying out a IP audio system, making sure that the expectations to your customers are well handled, and then also to make sure that what you've sold them is going to work.
Absolutely.
Brandon, you want
one thing I'm. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to actually kind of point out, if you wanted to, I couldn't remember, or I may not have seen you go over it, but on the speaker, into the speaker itself, if you mind pulling that up for me, I was wanting to go over a few of the things. I saw you go over quite a bit, but also want to go over some unique options that we have here, as far as whenever you're using this as like a two-way communication, that's the perfect screen to be on right there. So right there under the mic, a lot of great things, a lot of great options that we have right there. That AEC, that's an automatic echo canceling. So if you've ever called into a conference call and they've had their speakerphone on essentially, and you've heard your own voice kind of echo back to you and it's kind of disturbing, that's because that speaker on their end is not hearing the echo and then automatically canceling out your own voice when it's going back into its own microphone. We have an adjustment here to where you can activate this automatic echo canceling and then adjust for the time. So if you have a large room, it might take longer for that echo or for that voice to go from the speaker, hit the wall, and come back and hit the microphone. Right here, we can adjust that right there. And that AGC, that's our automatic gain control. What I like to consider that is easiest way to think about that is like the smart sound on your TVs. If you had those commercials that start blaring out so much louder than the regular output of all the rest of your program that you were watching. That's exactly what this does. So any kind of crazy loud noises would get regulated to where it doesn't, blow out the other end, essentially, which it wouldn't blow out anyways. But not to, of course, have a loud sound where you don't want one. The HPF there, that's our high pass filter out really high pitched noises. And then of course our noise reduction right there, right beneath. And then it of course has additional levels as far as you'd be able to adjust that. A lot of those, I know those are fairly unique uh, ways as far as being able to set this up with the audio. I wanted to make sure. I didn't know if you had covered that already or not.
I did not, and I appreciate that. And Brandon, while you're here, if you would explain just for those on here that don't understand so much about what is RTP multicast and how is it used in IP audio?
All right, so that's a real-time protocol. So how it works is, if Daniel, if you mind going to the server for me and pulling up that multicast, and we'll kind of start there. So you look at it like this is wherever your server is, and of course on the same network, it's going to start whenever you hit start on that, it's going to actually kind of cast out this audio onto that IP address, the one you see there ending in 0.1 with a port of 6,000. And so whatever audio you have for this zone, so this could be zoned out for not just a separate set of a separate audio, but also for separate zones. So for instance, let's say you had 3 buildings, 30 speakers total, 10 speakers per. You can literally go through and set up separate zones so you would have a multicast to set up for if you wanted to page just through building 1. Well, then that multicast IP for building 1 speakers, that multicast IP, you would copy that right there, and then you would go and paste it into the speaker, or even better yet, I'll show you can do it that way. Or if you go back to the server, we actually have a way for you to be able to actually do that all from the server, which is super convenient. If you pull up exit out of that for me real quick, Daniel, I want to show where we can actually, if you pull up the main server window. Thank you. And on the bottom, so if you click on, let's say the RTP multicast right there for me. Oh, I'm sorry. I directed you wrong. On the IP speaker line, if you click on the RTP multicast there down the line, see right there, you can actually set what you want. Let's say you can choose your 10 speakers that you're going to want them all to have the same multicast that are going to be in that one building. This is where you can set it directly, and you can set it for all the ones that you have selected. So you don't have to go into every single one and program every single one. You can actually program all of them directly from here from the audio manager, which is super convenient. But that's essentially how that works. You can have separate zones and separate audio files or bells or schedules that are set to go off all within this audio manager. And they're all tied to an IP address that you have sitting on your speaker within a priority. And so whichever one is playing, whichever one has highest priority, and that's the one that's going to supersede and win and play on that speaker.
Well, thank you, Brandon. So to kind of recap for everybody there, so RTP multicast is the way that we're telling the speakers, we're giving them that address, and then that's how they're all sitting on a common zone.
Oh, right, absolutely. And also, that's kind of like tuning into a radio station, if you want to think of it like that. This is where you're going to be broadcasting your audio. And then this is you can consider that that multicast IP, you can consider that your radio station that you're giving it. And then you just got to put that same number into the speaker for it to tune into that audio. If that might be a better way of looking at it.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do here, everybody, we're just giving you different ways to be able to look at it. We're giving you different ways to be able to access the speaker. We understand here that everybody's on a different learning level. Some people have better communication with Brandon if you're talking very techy. I'm here to give you kind of the overview how to go into each of these devices. And we'll just kind of continue on here. And Brandon, if you want to add anything, just feel free to add in. So
Absolutely.
we have the ability here also to be able to select the schedule to be able to enable a schedule as far as when are the start and the stop times of this particular zone or this particular, well, what's the best way to word that, Brandon? Schedule that you're working with.
Yeah, I would consider that it would be a zone, and it depends on the way you have it kind of set up. Of course, it could be you could have essentially the same audio, but if you wanted to separate it for different buildings, then it depends on how you go to set it up. But yes, that way you can schedule exactly like when the bell goes off, for instance. And so if a bell is always supposed to go off at certain times, this is where you would set that zone, and you could apply it to all the speakers if you want. Uh, and then you can have a separate schedule, or you have a separate, I don't necessarily want to say zone, but another source or zone source to where you could have a microphone, if it's of course in the higher priority. Whenever you use that microphone, it'll come through in page, it'll stop the audio that you have from the one and start playing your broadcast.
Okay, let's back up here. So what you've heard Brandon talk a few times about priorities. And so basically the priorities are once we set the source in the speaker, then however it is brought in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to set certain priorities for what is going to take place. And then what Brandon's saying is that you can create schedules based off of multiple things. And that's why when you're working with this, it's important to get with Brandon too. And it's a lot of you all are probably already dealing with this. It's just we want to make sure that we have all of our resources out there to help you configure this off the get-go. So if we select, we have a couple different options here as far as this is going to be our sources, audio media. So if we wanted to drop in any type of files, that can be done under the audio media section, audio sources. So this is telling us what are we going to choose as the source to be able to talk down. And so you'll see here, I've got selections between speakers and I can actually hear it echoing here, or we can select the microphone. So we can use the microphone on this PC to talk down through that, whatever's broadcasted to that multicast IP. We can also use live radio. This is something pretty unique too, that we actually have an account here set up. We can hit play and it'll test that live radio connection. Or you heard Brandon say that you can use the typical bell ringing too, which are going to be any of the predetermined sounds that are built into the system.
Also with the mic input on the audio inputs tab, so you normally have like a 3.5 meter on the back of your computer. You can use that also to go, of course, plug into a wireless microphone if you want. And so a receiver would sit where your server is, and then your wireless microphone would be wherever you need it to be. And whenever you fire it up and use it, and that's when it goes to activate and page. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be also the microphone that's tied to the server.
Yeah, so lots of different applications. This is kind of what we showed you earlier with this particular install. There's lots of different ways to be able to use the mic in your applications, whether you want it to be a deterrent feature, whether you want to use it for audio and paging. It's really up to you to listen to what the customer is wanting, or all the time the customer doesn't know what's available to them. There is an added cost with adding an IP speaker on there, but if you're looking for a deterrent, there's no better deterrent on the market than 30-watt speaker yelling you're trespassing on private property, or the capabilities for things like monitoring stations to be able to use those to either trigger deterrent devices or to be able to talk down to an individual who is not supposed to be on premise. So that's pretty much what I had for everybody today. Brandon, anything you want to add to kind of sum it up? We have one question here that I know we're going to have to get back to. Are the ceiling speakers plenum? David, if you don't mind here, give me your email address. Let's see. And John, I see you have a question there. If you would, just drop it in the chat box. Do the cameras and speakers need to be on a different network segments? That's a good question, Mark. So to answer your question, they do not. If for this application, if you can still see my screen, if I had for this application here, I could power it up through either just a PoE injector, PoE switch, or if I had an extra channel on the recorder, I can plug it in and use the PoE of the camera of the recorder. Now, keep in mind when you do that, it's going to pop up IP camera on the screen. It is going to take up a channel, but I'm not going to have I can't use it on the recorder. So you could only use that on the cameras. But no, if your speakers and your cameras resided on the same network, you just wouldn't want to bring them in. But it would see them because they're running a Speco protocol. Really good question. Anybody else have any questions? Please drop them in. And if not, I do want to tell everybody. So John, Brandon, you want to take this one? John asked the question here. Where do you get the multicast IP address?
All right, so it would depend on your SIP server. So the one that I recently set up at home, I went to ringcentral.com to set up mine, and so I have mine set up to where I can call my speaker from right now, and it'll have a little tone, and then it'll auto answer for me, and I can listen and talk right there into my office at any moment, straight from my cell phone here. Kind of fun, but what's what I've got all that information is whenever you go into this Ring Central, it's set up as a telephone. And when you go to provision the telephone in Ring Central, it'll probably have an option for like look up brand of telephones, and it's going to throw you through all type of Polycom models. But you'll also have an option to set up manually through SIP settings. And then when you click that, it's going to then give you all the information that you need to get logged into their SIP account or your SIP account that's on their platform. So that, depending on your SIP information or your SIP platform, they'll be giving that to you. Now, I will also say at the same time, now and of course, it runs about maybe $25, $30 for this one line. Let's say you have 100 speakers and you want to individually be able to call down to each one like a school. Well, you're probably not going to be using something like Ring Central for that. You're more than likely, to save money, going to have your own SIP server on site. And then at that point, your SIP server, you'll be able to get all that information from your SIP server and then assign pretty much all of them their own extension numbers if you want to. That way you can page to all or just to one and then talk back and forth directly to a classroom just by hitting an extension number, all within your own SIP server. Um, Feel free to revise that there for me, Daniel.
Yeah, no, I think that was really good. Let's see, you're using Lint Phone has been registering for a few days. Brandon, if you don't mind, just type in there the chat box which service you were using that you had success with. And I think
Ring Central, but yeah, I will.
Yeah, Ring Central. And also Patrick, he asked the question, can we use speaker mic combo via remote phone? And I think Brandon just kind of summed that up for you as well. That's something that he's actually doing now.
Absolutely. And another thing that I've not heard y'all ask about yet, but one of the thoughts that I had was, oh well, you may not want a direct external telephone number be able to just dial in and talk to an entire school, but of course, you'll be able to with an internal SIP server. If you have one on site, of course, it'll have the options to be able to be internal only or only accept calls from certain numbers. Just like with Ring Central, I can set mine up to only accept calls from particular numbers. But yes, you can use it just pretty much just like it's a telephone. You just can't dial out from it is the only difference.
All right. Great questions, everybody. So let's see if we have any more. So Brandon and I will stay on here for about 5 more minutes, see if anybody has any questions. If not, we want to thank everybody for your time today. And we definitely look forward to seeing you in the weeks to come, and we're excited to see what everybody's got going on for the new year. Thank you and have a great day.